At the moment, have you felt the full force of everything yet in Dunedin, in Mosgiel?
I can't say that we've felt the full force, but it's already pretty bad. And it's shaping up to be possibly as bad as the flooding that happened in June 2015.
Okay, so that's your pick. I mean, that's your comparison. You're looking at the local situation and thinking it could be a bit nasty tonight?
Yes, and certain areas of South Dunedin are below sea level, and because of how the tide goes, it actually comes up through the ground there.
Yes.
And when there's lots of rain on top of the ground, and then it comes, and then the ground's already full of water, it kind of can flood really badly. I
know they're sandbagging in South Dunedin, aren't they? But they also reckon they've got those mud traps and drains pretty clean.
Yeah.
So are you going to do this for a career now?
I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, it's going pretty well. I hit 700 likes today on my Facebook page.
Oh, fantastic.
Cool.
That's marvellous. Well, you've been doing it splendidly, and it's certainly an extra... It's an extra service for Mosgiel in particular, so you're especially accurate with the Taieri Plains.
Yeah, because I live there, and I kind of have more local knowledge than most forecasters because I live here.
Well done, Ben, and all the best for tonight and everybody in the south, and good luck with your forecasting.
Thank you.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it?
Brilliant.
It's
fantastic.
Wonderful. He's doing very well. Yeah. The movie Dunkirk has all the hype at the moment. Are you keen to see it?
I am. I'm always interested in history, particularly World War II history.
Can it ever live up to the Snow Goose, though?
No, that's
a very good point.
I don't know. I've had one friend who's a film reviewer who's really enjoyed it, and one who's called it a lot of old slop. So,
really?
Yes. He has been in the minority, I have to say, but,
I found it interesting, as critics have pointed out, that, because I haven't seen it, that it does away with the narrative scaffolding that holds together most war pictures. There's no boot camp, there's no band of brothers, there's no military old blokes debating strategy over maps, there are no cutaways of families waiting back at home, Mike. It just jumps straight in.
Well, that's probably closer to reality, isn't it?
Yeah. It opens globally in at least 6 different formats. And gee, isn't that fascinating? IMAX 70mm and straight 70mm and IMAX with laser projection. I think unless you're in Auckland, it'll be pretty standard. Are you a bit of a snob about how you see a movie or not?
No, I'm not at all. Although I have been to 3D movies with grandchildren on a couple of occasions and thoroughly enjoyed them.
I have my 3D glasses stashed at home because they cost you $1. So when you go, or $2 or something like that, so I keep a set of them for the family.
Good
in
on
the
you.
drawer, yeah.
Ask Catherine, says a texter, if she's seen the mini crossword in the New York Times. It is very addictive, although quite parochial.
Oh, don't give me something else to look at. I do the quizzes as well, do the stuff quiz and then the 5-minute daily quiz. And I used to do the Guardian quiz before they stopped it. So there are too many things lining up, and now you've just made me want to go and look at it. Thank you.
I've checked the Collins Dictionary and Thesaurus and find no mention of swang, says John
Jim,
Scott of
what were you looking at?
Maybe Jim could tell us which dictionary he is using as a reference for his version of English. Look, believe me, I didn't want to find the word swang. But it was there. Catherine, thank you very much for joining us. Catherine Robertson on the panel. And Mike, you too, Mike Williams.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Have a lovely weekend, everybody, and good luck in the south in particular for the weather. And Sharon Brett Kelly is coming up tonight on Checkpoint.
Kia ora everyone, I'm Sharon Brett Kelly in for John Campbell on Checkpoint on RNZ National. Tonight, wild weather whips its way through the country and rivers rise. A state of emergency is declared in Timaru. The police and the chief coroner issue warnings about the dangers of synthetic cannabis after 7 deaths in Auckland alone this month. Colgate faces heavy criticism after revelations it's the only manufacturer continuing to use a potentially harmful antimicrobial agent in its Colgate toothpaste. The EY Entrepreneur of the Year finalists are out, but of the 16, just one is a woman. OJ Simpson will walk free from a Nevada prison in October.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon, ko Katrina Batanaho. A state of emergency has been declared in the Timaru district, and emergency management staff in Otago are on watch as heavy rain causes flooding across much of the lower South Island. The Timaru Council says the significant rainfall coupled with rising river levels from rain in the foothills means flood-prone areas may need to be evacuated at short notice. The council's activated its emergency management centre, but says anyone who feels unsafe in the Timaru area should leave without waiting for official word. Civil Defence has also swung into action around Oamaru, with residents already evacuated from Walbrook Crescent. There is surface flooding on many streets in the town, as well as State Highway 1 from the Waitaki Bridge to Oamaru. The two bridges in the town are underwater, and authorities say another is likely to breach very soon. They say anyone who feels they should evacuate is urged to go now while it's still light. Chris Hawker from Emergency Management Otago says they're most concerned about the Waitaki district and Dunedin City. He says people can help by ensuring they're prepared.
There's a number of things that people can do and have a look at their own situations and just make sure that if they feel that they've got vulnerabilities, that they've got clear access out of their properties. If there are issues that start to develop, they need to advise, I suppose, initially emergency services if they've got urgent issues.
Chris Hawker says his emergency management team will be on duty overnight monitoring the situation. The Transport Agency says drivers should avoid State Highway 1 between Christchurch and Oamaru, as flooding has made many parts of the road near impassable. A spokesperson says conditions are now treacherous and roads may close at short notice. A Met Service severe weather warning remains in place for parts of the South Island, and travellers this weekend need to check forecasts and road closure notices before heading out on the road. The agency says people travelling between Christchurch and Picton are advised to allow extra time due to school holiday traffic and roadworks. Snow and ice are possible again on the major alpine mountain passes. Dunedin Airport has cancelled several flights because of what it describes as extreme weather. 7 incoming flights this afternoon from Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch have been cancelled, and 7 departing flights have also been cancelled. Flights arriving or leaving after 7 p.m. have not yet been cancelled. Among those affected by the weather is the Otago Highlanders team, whose flight to Christchurch has been cancelled. The team is due to play the Canterbury Crusaders in a Super Rugby quarter-final in Christchurch tomorrow night. The team is now looking at other options, including a bus trip. Some of the Highlanders teams have jokingly suggested on Twitter that the game should be shifted to Dunedin. The police say they don't know what has led to a spike in deaths related to synthetic cannabis. The Chief Coroner and the police have both issued a warning about the dangers of the drug after 7 deaths in Auckland this month. Judge Deborah Marshall says all those who died are believed to have used synthetic cannabis recently or were found with the drug on them. Detective Inspector Gary Lendrum says the police are seizing it every day, with children as young as 13 found high on it just last week. He says anecdotally it could be that the synthetic cannabis has been laced with something else causing deaths. Mr Lendrum says more people will die unless something is done, and the police need the public's help finding those selling it. The head of Capital and Coast Health has announced she'll step down at the end of the year, saying it's time for a new challenge. Debbie Chin took over as interim head of the CCDHB in 2013 and was appointed as permanent chief executive in 2015. She says the highlight of her time there has been the amazing staff who've shown incredible dedication and commitment to their patients. The Wellington Health Board has struggled with debt, but Mrs Chin says she's grasped opportunities to deliver more and better services to patients.
We built a $15 million youth forensic unit for youth across the country, a new dialysis unit built at Kenapuru. Recently we've spent a lot of money upgrading our radiology equipment, and we've got a new children's hospital being built.
The nurses' organisation has praised Debbie Chin's leadership and says she's always valued the support she had from it and other health sector unions. A bag used by Neil Armstrong to collect the very first samples of dust and rock from the surface of the moon has been sold at auction in New York for more than $2 million. The sale coincides with the 48th anniversary of the Apollo 11 lunar landing. It's 5 past 5.
To sport, the Hurricanes won't need any extra reminders of the Brumbies' attacking threats before their Super Rugby quarter-final in Canberra tonight. In their previous regular season meeting in Napier, the Brumbies scored 3 unanswered first-half tries before the defending champions ran away with the game in the second half. Hurricanes coach Chris Boyd says they can't afford to have the same defensive lapses this evening.
We let them get their tail up and we battled a little bit to slow that momentum down. So we certainly have talked about that and hopefully we're a little bit sharper.
That match kicks off at 9:35 p.m. The Highlanders have received a boost for next season, with All Black swinger Waisake Naholo confirming he's re-signed with the Super Rugby franchise. Naholo had been weighing up a move to the Chiefs for 2018. However, in a social media video posted by the Highlanders, he's announced his intention to stay in the South for another year. Naholo's decision is welcome news for the Highlanders following today's confirmation that fellow All Blacks back Malakai Fekitoa will leave at the end of the season to take up a contract in France with Toulon. And that New Zealand is topping the medal table after 3 days of competition at the Commonwealth Youth Games in the Bahamas. New Zealand athletes added 6 medals in the pool and 2 in track and field to top the table with 8 golds, 3 silvers and 4 bronze medals. That's the news.
Tonight on Ice, we look ahead to this weekend's prawn fishing competition in Taupo. How they got the prawns there is another story. The stakes are high on country life, but hopefully not too high. And because he was in a couple of weeks back, Paul Brennan is dedicating the Sonic Tonic to the word out. On nights from far out to out of bounds to out of order, you'll find it pays to be in by the wireless after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, and there are warnings and watches for severe weather around New Zealand, Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumaranui. Frequent showers, some heavy with squally thunderstorms and hail, easing tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, scattered showers becoming widespread later tomorrow. Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington, also Wairarapa, scattered showers, some heavy, turning to rain tomorrow morning. Rain easing north of Kapiti later tomorrow. Severe northwest gales about Wellington and Wairarapa, easing tonight. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, outbreaks of rain, possibly heavy, clearing to fine spells tomorrow morning, but showers persisting about coastal Marlborough. Westland and Fiordland, scattered rain clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine, severe southeast gales easing tomorrow. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, periods of rain with heavy falls, southerly gales and snow lowering to 500 metres tonight, all easing gradually from the south tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, occasional rain. It's 5:08, and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Kia ora, Katrina. The South Canterbury town of Timaru is in a state of emergency as rising floodwaters threaten properties. Residents in at-risk areas are being told to get ready to leave their homes at short notice. Many roads are closed and people are being told not to travel. Emergency services are checking at-risk areas and will help evacuate properties if they need to. Mayor Damon Odie is with us now. Good evening. What's happening there at the moment?
Good evening. Well, we're keeping a close watch on the weather. It is steady now. It's not intensifying. We did declare a state of emergency, so we do have those other powers if we need to do further stuff during the night. But we are advising people to self-evacuate and obviously to check on their neighbours and keep an eye on the weather out there.
Which are your worst areas? Which are the at-risk areas?
Well, it's some of the low-lying reserve areas with huts around Strathie Allen and different areas like that, which are close to riverbanks. Some of those are overtopping, and of course we're keeping a close eye on stock banks to make sure there's going to be no breaches, and keeping a close monitor on those river levels with our regional council again.
Have any properties been evacuated yet?
Police have been out advising some people that they should take the benefit of daylight and self-evacuate. Or else they're taking down details of people that are choosing to stay in those areas. So if we do have to do something further in the night, we know who is on site and where they are.
And any homes flooded at this stage?
Not that I've had any reports of. No, there has been some surface flooding out of one of the business areas, but at this stage I haven't had any reports of properties being flooded out.
What are you telling people now?
Well, we're telling people, I say, in low-lying areas that they should choose to self-evacuate if they feel unsafe. They should also make sure that they keep listening in for further updates on any changes. But as I say, the weather is not intensifying, it's staying relatively steady, and the river levels aren't rising as fast as first anticipated.
Thank you. That's Timaru Mayor Damon Odie, and we'll have more on the bad weather affecting much of the country throughout the show. Unless something is done, more people will die. That's the stark message from the police today after it was revealed synthetic cannabis has been linked to at least 7 deaths in Auckland alone in the last month. The police say there are reports of people as young as 13 years old using the illegal drug. Detective Inspector Gary Lendrum says police are seizing synthetic cannabis every day and they have a clear message for the public.
What we'd like to do is for people that are using this product to stop using it. Family members that are aware of family members that are using it to try and intervene in their lives and get them to stop using this product. If they can't get them to stop, please seek help for those members of their family. Okay, because what we're knowing is that if we don't do something about this, further people are going to die. The other message is simply this, is that police have been targeting the distributors of this product for some time, but we can only do that if we get the public's help and assistance. So I'm asking the public, please contact us if you're aware of people in your community that are selling this drug. This is a problem right across New Zealand. It's not just confined to Auckland. And what I'm aware of is that our frontline staff are reporting that there has been a significant increase in the number of incidents involving the use of synthetic cannabis. They are coming across people that are acting like zombies, that are vomiting, that are lying on the street unconscious, that are stripping off in public. The behaviour is really disturbing. We're not sure why this is occurring, but unless we do something about it, what we do know is that further people are going to die. It's right across society as well. We've got reports of 13-year-olds right through to 64-year-olds using this product.
And that's Detective Inspector Gary Lendrum. Well, St John's says it hasn't been this concerned about an illegal drug since GHB came on the market many years ago. I asked its medical director, Dr Tony Smith, what the ambulance service has seen recently.
We've seen what appears to be a sudden spike in patients suffering life-threatening problems following consuming synthetic cannabis, and we're sufficiently concerned about the possible link to want to send a warning to the public that these drugs appear to be very dangerous, and hence the reason for our wanting to publicise this.
What has happened? Can you give us more details about these deaths?
Well, we've currently being called up to approximately 20 times a day in Auckland to people suffering life-threatening problems following what appears to be synthetic cannabis. And those life-threatening problems include people being unconscious and or having seizures. And in a small number of cases, we've seen patients where their heart has suddenly and unexpectedly stopped. That's called a cardiac arrest. And we've certainly seen up to 7 people whose deaths in the last month appear to be possibly related to synthetic cannabis.
And when you say they are they linked because these people are getting their drugs from the same source?
We don't know that. We just don't have enough information on that at the moment to be able to provide that link.
And you haven't seen these figures before? These, like 7 deaths in 1 month and 20 people a day? From
other drugs?
Yeah, or from synthetic cannabis?
No. So something has changed. Whether it's the drug or the addition of another drug, we just don't have an answer to that at the moment. But clearly something has changed, and I know I haven't been this concerned about an illegal drug since GHB came on the market many years ago.
And what are they doing? Are they ringing 111? Are they turning up at emergency departments? What is happening?
So commonly what is happening is that they're becoming unconscious and or having seizures, and someone else is calling the ambulance. When we arrive, they're sometimes still unconscious. As they regain consciousness, it's common for them to have very disturbed and violent behaviour, and it's common for their violent behaviour to be sufficient that they're in immediate danger to themselves, a danger to the people around them, and a danger to the ambulance personnel and the healthcare personnel who are currently trying to help them. These drugs are of significant concern.
And what age are we talking about here? Young people?
We're seeing a range of ages, everything from teenagers all the way through to middle-aged people.
And you say that they're dangerous to the staff as well. What do you mean by that?
Well, they're commonly very violent, and it's common for one patient to need to have up to 2, 3 or 4 staff looking after them to keep them safe because they can be very, very violent.
This is happening in Auckland. Are you aware of it happening in other parts of the country?
Yes, although the spike appears to be predominantly in Auckland at the moment, we are also starting to hear reports of cases outside of Auckland.
And in terms of the kind of treatment that these people need, what is it?
So there's no specific treatment for the drug. We just need to look after the patient and wait for the drug to go away. But the patients who are unconscious will commonly need people to look after their airway, that is to prevent their tongue from falling back and blocking their throat, to give medicines to control seizures, and to give medicines to control severe, agitated, violent behaviour.
Are there long-term effects from this drug use?
We just don't know that at this time.
So there's so much unknown about it.
There's a lot that we don't know. What we do know is that there appears to be a spike in patients with life-threatening problems, hence our reason for going to the public with a warning. Our absolute message is do not take these drugs. We believe that they're extremely dangerous. If someone does take these drugs and appears to have a life-threatening problem, for example, they're unconscious or having seizures, people need to immediately call 111 and ask for an ambulance.
And that's St John Medical Director Dr Tony Smith. The finalists for EY's Entrepreneur of the Year have been announced, but the list has raised the ire of some who are questioning why the 16 includes only one woman and why only one woman has taken out the top award since 1998. EY says 12 women made up a third of the nominees, but lawyer Mei Chen was the only female finalist selected. We'll hear from EY after 6 o'clock, but first let's hear from Mei Chen. I spoke with her a short time ago and asked her what she thought as she stood on the stage at last night's announcement and realised she was the only woman.
I must confess that I thought it was a bit odd because there are lots of fantastic women entrepreneurs out there. And I know that because, you know, I created a women leaders group in Wellington that's still going after 12 years, and it's got over 200 women, and I was inaugural chair of New Zealand Global Women, and, you know, I set up New Zealand Asian Leaders, and I now chair, and having founded Super Diverse Women, I know there are lots of wonderful entrepreneurs out there, so I was surprised. So, of course, I raised it, and I just said to the organisers and to the judges that I was surprised. But, you know, we've got some amazing judges on the panel for this EY Entrepreneur of the Year. I mean, we've got Anne Norman, very strong, fantastic entrepreneur, and then we've got Carmel Fisher. So, you know, together with Tim Alp, CEO and founder of Juicy, and Dan Radcliffe. So, not surprisingly, what they said is, look, you know, at the end of the day, we make decisions on merit, and we just didn't have the depth and calibre of applications. So what it made me realise is that we mustn't stereotype when we encounter situations like this and say, oh, look, it must be sex discrimination. Look, at the end of the day, I was brought up to understand that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So at the end of the day, there just are not enough women putting up their hand or being nominated by other people for these awards.
May, do you know who the other women were? We understand about a third of those who entered were women, so about 12. Do you know any of the others?
No, I don't. Look, I'm very reluctantly involved in these sorts of things because you know, when you look at previous winners like Carmel Fisher, I mean that's 50 reasons why you should never enter these awards because there are far better people than you. So no, I don't know the others involved.
Did you nominate yourself?
Next year, Well, for the last 20 years, I have been approached by people to enter in various forms. Generally, every year someone says, look, you should put your hat in the ring, and do you want me to nominate you? So I decided this year that it was going to be this year and nothing.
So you nominated yourself for it?
Yes, I did this year. Mm-hmm.
So what do you...
But I was approached by others to do it, but it's easy. They do it, you do it. You fill it out, they put it in. It doesn't make much difference.
Do you think?
But it's good that other people. It is good that it's good that other people prompt you to do it.
Yes, but do you think that there's something wrong with the process though, if only one of the 17 finalists is a woman? And I think since 2001, there's been 16 men and only one female winner.
I think that you have to be very careful about diagnosing the problem. And I have been very strong in saying that just as we don't want stereotypes applied to us, we should not apply stereotypes to other people. At the end of the day, when I asked the judges, I was told that at the end of the day there weren't the depth of applications. And given the calibre of the people who are on the judging panel, I take them at their word.
But
we've got Anne Norman, we've got Carmel Fisher, we've got Tim Alp, and we've got Dan Radcliffe. And they tell me that they're making merit decisions, and I believe them. So I think that what is needed here is that it's important for entrepreneurial women to apply. And they should back themselves, and they should do it. And look, I well understand why they don't.
Well, why don't you think women are applying? They're out there, aren't they?
In the previous 19 years, the reason why I have not agreed to have my name put forward by others, and why I have not myself put myself forward, is because you never feel you've done enough. You always look at other people and think, my God, they're amazing, and I'm not one of them. I'm not Peter Beck. I'm not the CEO of Rocket Lab. And then, of course, there's that damned form. Most of us are really busy, and filling out that form is just a killer because it's a long form and there's a lot of detail on it. So, look, it's not for the faint-hearted, and for some people, it's just not what they want to do.
Do you think it sends a negative message, though, that of the 16 finalists, there's only one woman? Does it send a negative message out there to aspiring female entrepreneurs that they don't stand much of a chance of getting to the top?
No, I don't. And I once again want to reject the negative tone that you're trying to take to this. What it does make me galvanised to think is that women out there need to get themselves nominated and they need to apply. I think it's important. It's clear to me that we've got a judging panel here that is open, half men, half women. They are people who are reputable, they are well qualified, and they're very open-minded. So I think that you need to be very careful to draw a conclusion that somehow what you are suggesting here is that there might be some sort of systemic discrimination going on and they're doing women down. I can't see any evidence of that. I was surprised, however, and I can't believe I'm the only one that managed to get through. I mean, there are tons of people doing more than I'm doing in the entrepreneurial space. So,
and what do you think?
I say to those women is that those women should put themselves forward. And what I'm going to do now, because I still chair New Zealand Asian Leaders and Super Diverse Women, is that I am going to email all of those women who are entrepreneurs on those lists and say, look, there are these awards, and you should put yourself forward. And if you feel too shy to do that, we're really happy to nominate you. But you've got to be in the game. Because it's important.
And what do you think you'll get out of it if you win? What's in it for you?
Well, first of all, I'm not going to win, so I don't think there's any risk of that. What will I get out of it? Well, I don't know, really. I haven't thought about it.
Why don't you think you'll win, though?
Because there are fabulous people who are finalists.
But that's what the problem boils down to, doesn't it? That women keep thinking this way.
Well, precisely, and that's what I'm saying to you, Sharon. So I think as opposed to saying, oh my God, it's systemic racism, sexism, at the end of the day, sometimes there are people who are just in the pool and they're better than you.
And who do you think of that pool?
Oh, they're absolutely fabulous. I could go on. The list looks amazing.
And that's Entrepreneur of the Year finalist May Chen. And we'll hear from Susan Doughty from EY after 6 o'clock tonight. Colgate is facing heavy criticism this evening after revelations it's the only toothpaste manufacturer that continues to use a potentially harmful antimicrobial agent. Its Total toothpaste contains Triclosan, which has been banned for use in hand soaps in the United States because it's not proven to be any better than plain soap and water and is potentially harmful. Zach Fleming has more.
Chances are you've unwittingly ingested Triclosan today. The antibacterial and antifungal agent was developed in the 60s and quickly went from a hospital scrub to being used in shampoos, deodorants, toothpastes, mouthwashes, and now
plastic bags, that's even in toys now to try and stop fungal growth on them. The general global concern is that they're now being used, the Triclosan is being used in so many products that we are actually seeing an effect in the environment.
Dr. Jacqueline Roworth, the Environmental Protection Authority, or EPA's chief scientist. That's, as she said, the general global concern, but there's a more immediate local concern. Triclosan's been linked to allergy problems, hormone function, liver and kidney damage, and even cancer. And some of us have been putting it in our mouths via Colgate's Total toothpaste. Environmental toxicologist at Auckland University, Dr. Louis Tremblay, says the only people who should be buying it are people with gum disease.
It is effective to control gum disease. So for those people, I think it's quite important, because the benefit then outweighs the harm of those chemicals. However, I don't think it should be used by the white population because it doesn't really add anything to the product, and then people that are healthy don't need it.
The EPA wants to review its use in New Zealand, but formalities mean it needs a request from a member of the public first.
We know that in Europe that a review has been asked for because of ongoing people saying there are concerns about its use. And of course, as soon as we hear from the European reassessment, we'll be able to look within ourselves at our processes and current regulations again. But to stimulate something, there does have to be the formal request for reassessment.
Colgate refused to be interviewed today, but said in a statement it's confident Colgate Total is safe because of a, quote, rigorous review by the US Food and Drug Administration and the fact it's approved by regulatory authorities in Europe, Australia, Canada and New Zealand. But as Dr. Roworth just said, Europe wants to review that approval, and so does New Zealand.
Hello, Vanessa speaking.
I asked people sitting in the waiting room at Alpa's Dental Clinic in Auckland this afternoon what they thought.
Hello, how are you, Zach?
Hey, I'm great. How are you today? What are you waiting What are you in the waiting room for?
My son's plate check.
Ah, beautiful. So it's not too painful today.
No, hopefully not.
Hey, have you seen the Colgate news?
I did see it this morning, and funnily enough, I was just on my phone having another look at it just now.
What did you think about it?
Cause for concern. I do use Colgate toothpaste, and immediately I read it this morning. I went upstairs to check whether it was the Total brand or not, which it wasn't. So I did tell my husband this morning, make sure that we don't buy that one anymore.
So that was a sigh of relief. So that's it for you. You're never going to buy Total again.
I certainly won't buy Total. No, I will continue to buy Colgate as long as it's not the Total brand.
An Alpa's dental hygienist says consumers need to educate themselves on what toothpaste to buy.
I don't think that a lot of the population know what toothpaste to use. A lot of the time, and even with our patients, they'll come in and say when they stand in front of the aisle, it is very confusing. They don't know what to use because there's so many, and a lot of the time people just grab the cheapest.
And cheapest isn't necessarily what they need, is it?
That's right.
So what to do? If you don't have gum disease, Dr. Tremblay says it's an easy decision.
I think it's not a question of people stopping brushing their teeth and all that, but it's the next when they're at the end of their toothpaste, to try to maybe select something that doesn't contain triclosan.
For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
Coming up, the Social Housing Minister rejects a survey that puts New Zealand at the top of a list of developed countries for homelessness. OJ Simpson will walk free from a Nevada prison in October after being granted parole, and a Swedish rail operator vows to honour the results of a public vote and name one of its trains Trainee McTrainface. We'd love to hear your feedback on the EY Entrepreneur of the Year Awards and Colgate toothpaste. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. But first, here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
A state of emergency has been declared in the Timaru district, where heavy rainfall plus rising rivers from the rain in the foothills means flood-prone areas may need to be evacuated at short notice. The council is advising people who feel threatened by flooding to leave without waiting for official word. The Mayor of Timaru, Damon Odie, told Checkpoint people in low-lying areas are now evacuating their homes, but he hasn't heard of any houses being flooded yet. He says the rain is steady but doesn't seem to be getting worse, and the river levels don't yet seem to be rising to dangerous levels. Emergency management staff in Otago are also on watch as heavy rain causes flooding across much of the Waitaki region. Many roads are closed, some bridges in Oamaru have been breached, and people are being warned not to travel. The Transport Agency says drivers should avoid State Highway 1 between Christchurch and Oamaru, with many parts of the road almost impassable. A spokesperson says conditions are now treacherous and roads may close at short notice. A Met Service severe weather warning remains in place for parts of the South Island, and travellers this weekend need to check forecasts and road closure notices before heading out on the road. Dunedin Airport has cancelled several flights in and out of the city because of the extreme weather. The police say they don't know what has led to a spike in deaths related to synthetic cannabis. The Chief Coroner and the police have both issued a warning about the dangers of the drug after 7 deaths in Auckland this month. Judge Deborah Marshall says all of those who died are believed to have used synthetic cannabis recently or were found with the drug on them. The police are seizing it every day, with children as young as 13 found high in it just last week. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6 o'clock.
Thank you, Katrina. Turning to business news now with Nona Peltier. And Nona, a record number of people moved to New Zealand last month, along with a record number of tourists. So what are the latest numbers telling us?
Well, they're telling us that basically we had a lot of people come to New Zealand last month, including the Lions tour. So that was that added quite a lot to the visitor numbers. What, 21,500? But surprisingly, that's not as many as we had in the past. In 2005, there was 25,000, so fewer. But then fewer, I guess, rugby fans coming over, but there was a lot more people coming from Australia. So overall, our annual numbers are up 17% on the year earlier in terms of visitor numbers. And for migrants, 72,000 annual to the end of June. That's 72,000 people moved to New Zealand in the year ended June. And that's a net number, so it's a lot of people. We're not expecting that number to slow down. There's lots of demand for labor and so on, so you can expect that to be a steady increase. And of course, we're heading into the busy tourist season, so you can even expect more tourists. So find some space at the table.
Indeed. Now, a big day on the markets for the New Zealand dollar.
Yeah, a really big day. So the New Zealand dollar, look, I was here yesterday around the same time. Since then, the New Zealand dollar has risen almost a whole cent against the U.S. And that's partly because the U.S. Federal Reserve has kind of put a bit of cold water on the idea of interest rate hikes this year, with weaker economic data than people were expecting in the United States. At the same time, the European Central Banker, he was a bit more bullish about how things are going in Europe, and is looking at potentially stopping some of that quantitative easing that's been going on for many years. And closer to home, one of the Reserve Bank of Australia officials kind of was a little bit too dovish on the Australian currency, and that all combined to raise the Kiwi. And to top it all off, there was an interview with our Finance Minister, Stephen Joyce, who said he wasn't really worried about the strength of the local currency, and that was enough to send it soaring. So that all combined, a lot of people talking Move the currency almost a whole cent. So 74.2 US cents and 94 cents Australian, still quite strong. 57.2 British pence. And in terms of our top 50 index, the NZX share market, well, we fell only 2 points, just 2, to 7,000.
So much fallout from the Fletcher Building story?
A little bit more, but not enough to offset the gains that we saw in the market today. So Fletcher Building lost another 11 cents to $7.48, and it was on large turnover. But nevertheless, we finished at 7,671, which is pretty close to our record high, which is just above 7,700. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Nona. The Social Housing Minister is rejecting a Yale University survey that puts New Zealand at the top of a list of developed countries for homelessness. Amy Adams says the government is working hard to get people off the street by both paying for temporary motel accommodation and continuing to provide more social housing. But as the social housing waiting list tops 5,000 for the first time since the Ministry of Social Development took over responsibility 3 years ago, the government's being accused of failing to meet rising demand. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
The report from Yale University says about 1% of New Zealanders, or 40,000 people, are defined as homeless, either living on the street, in emergency housing or in shelter considered substandard. But it does note that getting an accurate picture of homelessness is challenging because many countries define it in different ways. Regardless, Labour's Phil Twyford says it's a terrible look for New Zealand.
Just another reminder that something is seriously out of whack. Now, what's changed is that the housing market has melted down. That's the thing that's changed in the last few years. That's why so many families can't find affordable rental housing.
The Greens co-leader James Shaw says the survey result is shameful.
For people who are paying attention, reports like the OECD and the Yale study do get noticed, and it really does hit New Zealand's international reputation amongst our peers to be seen as a country that is really leaving so many people behind.
However, the Social Housing Minister Amy Adams says the report is simply wrong.
They have used a number of 40,000 homeless, which they link as their source to a media story, which we don't accept as a number of homeless at all. I can tell you that right now on the social housing register, there are, I think, 990-something families have listed their reason for needing our house as homelessness.
Amy Adams says the report's authors themselves refer to problems with defining homelessness.
They say in the report that there is a lack of any consistent measure country by country. It makes it very hard to compare, and I think that is exactly the point I'm making. They're not comparing apples with apples, and to suggest that is our number of homeless is quite wrong, and therefore you really have to take any findings that draws from that with a large degree of caution.
Phil Twyford is also critical of the fact the government is now spending $140,000 a day putting people up in temporary motel accommodation.
If National hadn't run down and sold off the stock of state housing, they've presided over a net reduction in the number of state houses of 2,000 in the middle of a housing crisis. They've taken $1.8 billion out of Housing New Zealand in dividends and taxes and interest payments that could have been spent building 5,000 new state houses. Now, if they'd done that instead, if they'd built extra houses, they wouldn't have this problem.
The Minister Amy Adams makes no apology for paying for motel rooms, saying it's better than having people living on the street.
While they're waiting for a social house, we want to make sure they have somewhere safe to stay. And in the short term, that's been motels, and we think that's probably peaked now because we've got more and more of our transitional houses coming onto the market. And that's certainly our preference for that short-term accommodation. So we think that demand for the motel stays will now start to taper off.
The latest quarterly social housing report shows there are now more than 5,300 people on the social housing register, a jump of more than a third on a year ago and up 10% in the last 3 months. The government says as winter hits, it's doing its best to help house those who need it, citing that it has made about 350 more social homes and nearly 400 temporary houses available in the last 3 months. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
The former American football star and actor O.J. Simpson will walk free from a Nevada prison in October after being granted parole. Simpson has served 9 years of a 33-year sentence for an armed robbery involving sporting memorabilia. In 1994, Simpson was famously acquitted of the murder of his ex-wife Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman. With more, here's the ABC's Connor Duffy.
Less than 2 weeks after marking his 70th birthday in jail, O.J. Simpson appeared before a Nevada parole board to argue for his release. Dressed in a blue denim shirt and speaking in a calm voice, Simpson told the 4 commissioners he'd been a model prisoner since being convicted of kidnapping and armed robbery. Simpson enlisted armed men in 2007 to retrieve sports memorabilia he says belonged to him.
I believe in the jury system. I've honored their verdict. I have not complained for 9 years. All I've done is try to be helpful and encourage the guys around there, hey man, do your time, fight in court, and don't do anything that's going to extend your time. And that's the life I've tried to live because I want to get back to my kids and my family.
Simpson occasionally told jokes as he made his point to the men and women that would decide his fate. His daughter, Arnell Simpson, spoke on his behalf.
Throughout this ordeal, we have remained close. We have stayed strong. And I, for myself, am grateful to God for giving us the strength to get through this last 9 years and to stay positive always, no matter what.
Bruce Fremont, one of the targets of the robbery, also spoke in favour of Simpson's release.
And I feel that it's time to give him a second chance. It's time for him to go home to his family, his friends. This is a good man. He made a mistake. And if he called me tomorrow and said, Bruce, I'm getting out, will you pick me up? Juice, I'll be here tomorrow for you.
The 4 members of the parole board returned within half an hour of hearing evidence to present their finding.
Considering all of these factors, my vote is to grant your parole effective when eligible.
And I concur with Commissioner Korda and grant parole.
I concur with Commissioner Korda and agree to grant parole.
Mr. Simpson, I do vote to grant parole when eligible.
A clearly relieved O.J. Simpson reacted immediately.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Simpson could be released as soon as October. O.J. Simpson is best known for another crime he was charged over but not convicted. In the most watched trial in history in 1994, Simpson was found not guilty of murdering his ex-wife and her friend. 3 years later, he lost a civil case and was ordered to pay $33.5 million to their surviving families who are concerned about his impending release.
Connor Duffy reporting there. A temporary village has opened in the small Canterbury town of Waio to help residents who lost their homes in the Kaikoura earthquake. A 7.8 magnitude earthquake rocked the region last November, damaging property and closing State Highway 1. Logan Church went to meet the village's first resident, who's happy to get a proper roof over her head after living in a garage since the quake.
Torrential rain and flooding in Canterbury today didn't stop Waio residents from getting a glimpse inside a new temporary village established in the town. Opened by the Building and Construction Minister, Nick Smith, the village consists of 4 two-bedroom homes, which will house families whose homes were damaged in last year's earthquake. Dr. Smith says it's important for quake-hit residents to have a warm home this winter.
It will support the community by enabling the children to carry on at school, the people to carry on working in the community, rather than effectively having people abandon a town like Waio, where you need the continuity, not just for the economic factor of the people being able to work, but also from a social point of view of being able to maintain those important social bonds.
The quake hit Waio hard, with many houses damaged or needing to be completely demolished. One of the town's 200 residents, Margaret Anukete, has been living in a garage for more than 7 months. She is the village's first occupant.
We were living in a garage at my daughter's place, so she's only got a 2-bedroom house with 3 children. And so we got in here pretty good, so thanks to the hurricane council.
The houses were originally part of the temporary villages established in Christchurch after the 2011 earthquake, and have been purchased by the Huranui District Council for $24,000 each. Ms Anukete says the house offers her everything she needs, while she sorts out insurance on her own home.
Bring my clothes, my dishes was given to me and all that. Food, about all, and yeah. Well, I wanted a fully furnished house because I didn't really want to lug everything at my age.
Establishing the village has cost $1 million, paid by the government and the Hiranui District Council. The district's mayor, Winton Daly, says it's easy to underestimate how challenging the earthquake was for Waio's residents.
I just don't think that the drama, I guess, has been the same as it has for other areas. And the majority of the damage in our district is actually on private property, well hidden from public view and will never be seen by the public.
Mr Daly says the 4 houses could be utilised for other purposes, such as tourism, after the town has rebuilt.
At the point where they're no longer required for that, council will make a decision about their future, but that decision has not been made. There's been a lot of suggestions floating around about what their future might be, but all I can say is that council hasn't made that decision, but they will be put to good use in this community in the future.
Mr Daly says he hopes the village can help the tiny town prosper once again when it recovers from the big quake. In Waio for Checkpoint, Logan Church.
Labor's rolled out its $4 billion plan for the education sector, but it's more notable for what's not in it than what is. Its manifesto looks very similar to last elections, and virtually all of the policies have been pre-announced or signalled in the past year. But the opposition party insists its plan is a recommitment to public education, which it says has been neglected under National. Here's our political reporter Craig McCulloch.
Labour unveiling its education manifesto with its election slogan, a fresh approach.
This clearly lays out a choice that New Zealanders have in this year's election.
But it's a choice New Zealanders have seen before. The most radical policies were flagged months ago. The big ticket item, 3 years of free post-school education over a person's lifetime. Labour also wants to modernise all classrooms by 2030. But if you think you've heard that before, you're right. David Cunliffe promised it in 2014. It also wants to give $150 per student to schools who stop asking for voluntary donations, $50 each more than they pledged last election. Labour's education spokesperson Chris Hipkins makes no apologies.
I think we had a really good policy on education going into the last election campaign, and you'll see many of those things carried forward. I think probably we're being a little bolder around restoring the principle of free education at all levels and specifying what our first steps towards that will be.
And the party leader, Andrew Little, says it corrects years of underfunding and neglect by National.
This is about, following Labour's long-standing legacy from Peter Fraser of aiming for a world-class education system.
But the lack of new ideas didn't go unnoticed.
Oh, it just looks a huge amount like Deja Vu 2014.
Stephen Joyce is running National's campaign and isn't impressed by what Labour's offered up.
It already looks stale. Pretty much everything is stuff that they've announced in the 2014 campaign, except for one thing that was announced 18 months ago. It's like they just twinked out David Cunliffe's name and twinked in Andrew Little's name.
Labour has also ditched its promise to reduce class sizes. Mr Hipkins says the National Government has spent the money it would have used.
Our goal over time still is to reduce class sizes and employ more teachers, but we haven't made a specific commitment in the manifesto that we're announcing today.
No surprises, teachers have welcomed the overall proposal. Louise Green is from the Primary Teachers Union.
What they've done is responded really clearly to the messages that the educators, the sector, parents and communities have been talking about for quite a while now.
Labour also wants to scrap national standards and review NCEA. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
She's been described as the woman who brings humanity to the court when all humanity is gone. Michelle Kidd's day starts at dawn when she visits several spots in Auckland's CBD to check in on the city's homeless. Then the woman known as Fire Michelle is off to court, where she holds a unique role in New Zealand. Edward Gay filed this report on the social worker who doesn't get government funding, but is often the only friendly face that people see in an otherwise faceless and daunting justice system.
Michelle Kidd's office at the Auckland District Court is about the size of a prison cell. When she sits at her desk, she's overlooked by photos of people she's helped, photos of homeless people and of her whānau. There's also a corner covered with drawings done by maximum security prisoners from Peremeremo.
It actually means a great deal because, you see, they can't go and buy you a flower or take you for lunch or show their appreciation in any other way other than in their words and in their artwork.
Miss Kidd's time in the courts started with helping to get restorative justice conferences introduced 16 years ago. While working as a volunteer with the city's homeless, she saw them coming through the courts, being sent to jail and then released back on the streets without any treatment for addiction or mental health issues. She's now fighting for a specialist unit to treat prisoners' problems rather than just locking them up.
Can you imagine what it must be like detoxing in a cell and then your mental health issues coming to the fore? That is a nightmare. If we could only bring humanity back in, and I think that's why I'm still here, is that I still try to challenge quietly as possible, what I see of as a real issue of caring for one another. We seem to have mislaid it in this city.
Miss Kidd's other passion is the Family Violence Court. That's currently dealing with 1,200 cases in Auckland and Manukau. The court provides education to offenders and their families and also wraps support services around them.
We have many victims, but so often I see a victim is also a defendant, and until you engage with people, you really do not know the context of the crime.
Michelle Kidd says the specialist court is breaking the cycle of intergenerational violence. One of the thousands of cases that sticks in her mind is that of a homeless woman who was pregnant, addicted to drugs and sleeping on the floor of a garden shed. The woman appeared in court on minor charges.
With the assistance of another lawyer, I asked that she be kept because it was the child I was really worried about. If she had been released that day, the child could have been badly affected by the glue, the drugs.
After being released, the woman overdosed on drugs. Her children are now living with whānau and blossoming. Miss Kidd still gets photos of them, some of which are on her wall. She says a new approach is needed to help the homeless, and part of that is Te Kōti o Timatanga Hau, the New Beginnings Court, another project she helped get off the ground.
We will not have peace in the city if we do not have accommodation, if we do not have night shelters, if we do not have places where our sick people can go. It breaks my heart to see people begging on Queen Street. It breaks my heart that somebody would even think about putting sprinklers over their heads because they have nowhere else to go. It breaks my heart that $10 million is spent on putting lights on a bridge. And one of the boys came and said, who will turn the lights off at night when we need to sleep? Because they're under it.
And it's not just the homeless. Miss Kidd believes a philosophical change to justice is needed.
If we continue to just lock people up because there's nowhere else to go, then we're really going to miss out on a great deal of input that could come from people who are actually highly intelligent. It's just that something has gone terribly, terribly wrong.
Lawyer David Jones QC is a dedicated supporter. Miss Kidd's role at the Auckland and Manukau District Courts is unique, but Mr Jones says there should be people like her working in every court around the country.
Well, we'd like to clone Michelle, sort of not quite like Dolly the sheep, but if we could clone her, we would, because she does such a great job and she's a unique individual. It takes a special person to do what she does, and a lot of it is innate in her as opposed to being trained. In my view, she brings humanity to the court system when humanity is often gone.
That sentiment's echoed by Chief District Court Judge Jean-Marie Doog, who describes Miss Kidd as a link between the court and the community, particularly iwi. Judge Doog said she'd like to see others with iwi links working in the District Court. She says Miss Kidd is utterly committed to the homeless, who are often at risk of not attending court and as a consequence get arrested.
Michelle knows them all personally, and she knows where she will be able to find them, and she knows in what state they will be in. And by her efforts, she ensures they've had enough to eat, she ensures they're washed and appropriately addressed for the occasion, and she physically gets them to the court.
A fundraising dinner for Miss Kid, hosted by All Blacks coach Steve Hansen and veteran broadcaster Ian Fraser, is being held next Friday. Tickets are available online. She also has a Give a Little page. The money goes to Miss Kid's charitable trust, Te Rangi Mārie, and allows her to continue her work. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi ko Edward Gay aho.
Truffle fanatics from around New Zealand have converged on the Waipara Valley in North Canterbury for the area's third annual Truffle Festival. Our Christchurch reporter Maya Burry went hunting for the elusive and earthy smelling delicacy.
All right, shall we walk down towards the trees? Come on, Rosie.
So Gareth, just tell me where we're going.
Yes, we're walking through the garden down onto our front truffle block, where we're going to have a sniff around our burgundy and bianchetto trees.
And how confident are you that we're going to find something today?
100%.
I'm with Waipara Valley truffle grower Gareth Ronaldin, who is taking a group of truffle enthusiasts on a hunt around his 10-hectare farm, Limestone Hills.
Rosie, seek. Rosie, come on. Rosie, seek.
Armed with Rosie, the 7-year-old beagle, who is trained to sniff out truffles, Mr. Ronaldin is looking for the fungus which he started growing on this property in 2006. Rosie does these hunts most days of the week, and it doesn't take her long to sniff out a truffle, which is essentially an underground mushroom.
So at the moment, Rosie has been scratching away at the ground here rather enthusiastically because she smelt a truffle underneath. Oh, there it is, and she bit half of it off. You wretch of a beagle, that's above your pay grade, that is.
Mr. Ronaldin is not wrong about the truffle being above Rosie's pay grade. The 4 different types he grows here sell for as much as $3 a gram or $3,000 per kilogram. He says the Waipara Valley, known for its vineyards, provides a perfect environment for growing truffles.
So the reason why Limestone Hills is so good for truffles is because we have natural limestone soils. So all of the hills around here are made out of limestone, and the soil we're standing on is very alkaline, and that's ideal for truffles, but it's also ideal for high quality grapes too. Rosie, over here. Where is it, Rosie? Where is it, Rosie? Rosie, seek.
This truffle hunt is one of many that Gareth Ronaldin has been doing during the festival, which is timed with the peak of the truffle season. People have been travelling from as far afield as Auckland and Wellington for the festival events, which include hunts, cooking classes and truffle-themed lunches. Mr. Ronaldin says the industry in Waipara Valley is taking off.
There are more, I think, successful truffle growers in North Canterbury than any other part of New Zealand, which is one reason why we've got the Canterbury Truffle Festival running at the moment. There's probably more than 20 of us. It's mainly going into the domestic market at the moment, but there are some experiments with exports, and I think as the next sort of 5 to 10 years, it's going to turn out to be a significant export industry for New Zealand as a whole.
And for those put off by the high price tag, Gareth explains there's a reason for that.
Partly because they're rare. We are growing them now, but it's a hit and miss process. It's not a sort of a wonderful guaranteed way of making loads of money. You can, you can have a good year, you can have a bad year, but they are just a delicacy. They're there with champagne and caviar.
You don't ever get sick of eating truffles?
Oh, there is a point in the season where, we think possibly not truffled eggs for breakfast, but yes, you can have a fridge that smells too much of truffles because it gets into the milk and everything else, but no, not sick of them yet.
The Canterbury Truffle Festival wraps up at the end of the month. For Checkpoint, Maya Burry.
A Swedish rail operator is vowing to honour the results of a public vote and name one of its trains Trainee McTrainface. Trainee McTrainface won 49% of the votes in an online naming competition conducted by train operator MTR Express and Swedish newspaper Metro. It follows the disappointment caused by when Britain ignored a public vote and rejected the name Boaty McBoatface for a polar research ship. Here's Dave Russell from Radio Sweden.
Trainee McTrainface, that's the new name of one of the trains that'll be taking passengers from Stockholm to Gothenburg. This comes after MTR Express, the train operator, put the naming of 6 of its trains down to a public vote. After the British public unsuccessfully named a polar research vessel Boaty McBoatface last year, news of the Swedish train has made waves in the international media, including The Guardian and Time magazine. Here's Par Nasfi from MTR on his initial reaction.
For me, it was completely unexpected. I thought that it would be like famous Swedish people. But when the Train McTrain phase came, we could immediately see that the popularity of the name was so high.
Maybe it reflects Gothenburg's sense of humour.
Exactly.
What was your initial reaction when you found out about this?
My personal reaction was that I really enjoyed it. I mean, since the boat never was named boat phase, it felt like we did something in return.
Unlike what happened in the UK, you're going to honour the decision of the public and you're actually going to name the train Trainee McTrain face.
Exactly.
Now, in breaking news, NZTA says several South Island roads are now closed due to flooding. It says motorists are advised to avoid any unnecessary travel on State Highway 1 between Christchurch and Oamaru. They include State Highway 1 in Timaru between Jellicoe Street and Hobbs Street, that's closed. State Highway 1 from Pariora to Makikiki is also closed.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening, ko Katrina Batanaho. A state of emergency has been declared in Timaru. People have been evacuated in Oamaru, and emergency management staff in other parts of Otago are on watch as heavy rain causes flooding across much of the lower South Island. Sections of State Highway 1 are closed and authorities are warning against any unnecessary travel tonight. The Timaru District Council is warning people in low-lying areas they could be at risk from flooding and may need to evacuate their homes. The council has declared a state of emergency as heavy rain stalls over the region. Philip Howe of the Timaru Civil Defence says the declaration gives powers to evacuate people if necessary. He says the main risk is to low-lying roads and areas near rivers, particularly as rain in the high country is leading to rivers rising rapidly.
Certainly houses in low-lying areas or near rivers are at risk, and what we're saying to people is if you feel that you are definitely at risk, then don't wait to be told to evacuate, move out immediately.
Philip Howe, the council is setting up evacuation centres in Timaru and Temuka with their locations to go up on its website. Civil Defence has also swung into action around Oamaru with residents already evacuated from Warbook Crescent. There's surface flooding on many streets in the town, 2 bridges are underwater and fears are held for another. Dunedin City Council has activated its Emergency Operations Centre as heavy rain starts to hit the city. The Civil Defence Controller, Sandy Graham, says there are no major issues related to heavy rain at this stage. There is some surface flooding in Mosgiel and isolated areas in South Dunedin, which is being monitored. He says the heaviest rainfall is expected this evening and overnight. Several Otago rivers are rising as a result of heavy rain. The Otago Regional Council's flood management team says several rivers, the Kakanui, Shag and Tairi rivers, the Silver Stream, Water of Leith and the Lindsay Creek are all rising steadily. Natural Hazards Manager Jean-Luc Payan says that the rivers are expected to continue to rise overnight. Surface flooding is affecting roads across the region, particularly in coastal areas, but also in the central Otago district. And the Transport Agency is advising motorists to avoid travel on State Highway 1 between Christchurch and Oamaru. It says many parts of the road are near impassable and conditions are treacherous. It says roads may close at short notice. The police say more people will die from synthetic cannabis unless something is done. The police and the chief coroner have both issued a warning about its dangers after 7 deaths in Auckland this month. Tom Furley reports.
The police are urging those taking the drug to stop, and for those who know people using it to step in. Detective Inspector Gary Lendrum says officers are seizing it every day and have seen a significant increase in people high on it. He says in the last couple of days, a 13-year-old and a 16-year-old needed medical attention after taking synthetic cannabis. Mr. Lendrum is urging anyone with information about where the drugs are coming from to get in touch. He says they don't yet know what's caused the spike in deaths, however says anecdotally it could be that the synthetic cannabis is being laced with something else. This is Tom Furley.
The Social Housing Minister, Amy Adams, is rejecting an American university survey that puts New Zealand at the top of a list of developed countries for homelessness. The report from Yale University says about 1% of New Zealanders, or 40,000 people, are defined as homeless, either living on the streets, in emergency housing or in shelter considered substandard. But it notes that many countries defined homelessness in different ways. Ms Adams says the findings should be treated with caution, and the government estimates the number is closer to 4,000. The government's latest social housing report shows there are now about 350 more permanent homes and nearly 400 more temporary houses available than 3 months ago. Auckland Council says banning new liquor licences for 2 years will significantly reduce harmful drinking behaviour. The Alcohol Regulatory and Licensing Authority has upheld the Council's 2-year freeze on new licences in the city centre in 23 priority areas, predominantly in South and West Auckland. The authority has been considering appeals against the Council's policies, which are designed to reduce alcohol-related harm in vulnerable communities. The Deputy Mayor, Bill Cashmore, says the 2-year freeze will be followed by tighter restrictions on licensing. Mr Cashmore says the onus will be on the applicant to prove there is a need for their liquor store in the area. He says things such as the proximity to schools or established liquor stores will be considered. It's 6:05. The Hurricanes aren't focused on their superior record heading into tonight's Super Rugby quarter-final against the Brumbies in Canberra. Due to a quirk of this year's competition structure, the defending champions have to begin the playoffs on the road, despite finishing more than 20 points above the Brumbies on the table. However, flanker Brad Shields says the regular season doesn't mean anything for tonight's match.
We've talked about that all week, about how whatever's happened up until this point of the season doesn't really matter, doesn't influence the game, because at the end of the day we're playing the Brumbies at home, and it's a quarter final and they're going to bring their best game. So if we don't turn up prepared, ready to go, then we're going to get embarrassed.
Brad Shields. Meanwhile, the Highlanders wing Waisake Naholo has re-signed with the franchise for next season. Naholo had been considering an offer from the Chiefs for 2018. New Zealand Olympic cyclist Jamie Nielsen is hoping to break the world record for the longest distance ridden in an hour in Cambridge tonight. The current sea level record was set by Australian Bridie O'Donnell, who rode 46.8 kilometres last year. Nielsen is hoping to do more than 160 laps of the velodrome and says beating the current record is achievable. And New Zealand golfers Michael Hendry and Ryan Fox have their work ahead of them if they're to make the cut at the Open Championship in Southport. Hendry is 3 over par, while Fox is 4 over, 7 and 8 shots off the pace set by the tournament leaders. The pair tee off in the second round at Royal Birkdale at around midnight. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, just over a year ago, British MP Jo Cox was murdered by a right-wing extremist. Her widower, Brendan Cox, remembers an extraordinary woman. The new US ambassador to New Zealand, Scott Brown, will be with me to talk about politics, music, and Australian writer Charlotte Wood, author of the award-winning dystopian novel The Natural Way of Things. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Let's have a look at the weather from Met Service through to midnight tomorrow, and of course there are warnings and watches in place for the whole country. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumiranui. Frequent showers, some heavy with squally thunderstorms and hail easing tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, scattered showers becoming widespread later tomorrow. Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington, also Wairarapa. Scattered showers, some heavy, turning to rain tomorrow morning. Rain easing north of Kapiti later tomorrow. Severe northwest gales about Wellington and Wairarapa easing tonight. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, outbreaks of rain, possibly heavy, clearing to fine spells tomorrow morning, but showers persisting about coastal Marlborough. Westland and Fiordland, scattered rain, clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. Severe southeast gales easing tomorrow. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, periods of rain with heavy falls. Southerly gales and snow lowering to 500 metres tonight, all easing gradually from the south tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, occasional rain. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Kia ora, Katrina. A state of emergency has been declared in Timaru, and people in flood-prone areas are on alert in case they need to evacuate after heavy rain caused havoc across the lower South Island. In Dunedin, sandbags are being given out to those in low-lying areas, and the emergency services will be on watch overnight in case the conditions get even worse. Rachel Graham has more.
Persistent rain flooded multiple roads around Christchurch, Ashburton and Timaru, as well as many of the state highways in the region. The conditions were so bad this afternoon that a general warning was issued, saying that anyone that could avoid travelling on State Highway 1, south of Christchurch, should avoid it. Holly Hollander was heading into Christchurch from Akaroa this morning in heavy rain, when she had a lucky escape.
All of a sudden, I noticed movement on the side of the road, and it was like it happened in slow motion. The bank gave way, and this massive pine tree just went falling right in front of me. So luckily, I wasn't driving too fast because the road was, fairly wet. And anyway, so I just managed to stop quickly. But I was very lucky. I was counting my blessings, that's for sure, this morning, because 2 seconds later, and I could have been under that tree.
Ms Hollander says there has been quite a lot of flooding and debris around Akaroa, but it had started to subside by late afternoon. Sandy Newell from the Rakaya Holiday Park and Motels says they're starting to get customers who are after a bed for the night because they don't want to venture out any further in the hideous weather. When she drove from Ralston to Rakaya today, the road was almost impassable.
It's pretty wet out there and the traffic is just crawling because of the water on the road. Well, we're on a four-wheel drive, so we're fine. But I wouldn't like to be in a little car. I think they'd be getting a little bit nervous about travelling through the water. There's signs out that the Transit or whoever does the roading have done a good job so far, but I think it's just going to keep getting worse.
In Queenstown, strong crosswinds caused all flights in and out of the airport to be cancelled this afternoon, with no seats available for rebooking until at least Monday. In Timaru, there is concern that rising river levels could lead to houses needing to be evacuated. This afternoon, the council declared a state of emergency and warned that people in flood-prone areas need to be ready to evacuate at short notice. They are also recommending that anyone who feels unsafe leaves without waiting for an official notification. The heaviest rain has now settled in the lower South Island, and the Otago Regional Council is also on watch in case of any flooding. Chris Hawker from Emergency Management Otago says they're most worried about Waitaki and Dunedin City. He says people can help by ensuring they are prepared.
There's a number of things that people can do and have a look at their own situations and just make sure that if they feel that they've got vulnerabilities, that they've got clear access out of their properties. If there are issues that start to develop, they need to advise, I suppose, initially emergency services if they've got urgent issues. But we will certainly be talking to our communities on a relatively regular basis, letting them know what's happening and what we believe is likely to happen.
Mr Hawker says the Red Cross is already standing by and the Defence Force have offered up a contingent of soldiers who are in the area. He says his team will be on duty overnight and monitoring the situation in case conditions deteriorate further. For Checkpoint, Rachel Graham.
The Associate Health Minister Peter Dunn says a spate of deaths linked to synthetic cannabis could have been prevented if the products hadn't been banned and driven underground. The police revealed today that 7 deaths in the last month in Auckland have been linked to synthetic cannabis, with a significant number of users hospitalised after using the fatal drug. They say they're seizing synthetic cannabis every day, and there are reports of users as young as 13 years old. I asked Associate Health Minister Peter Dunn for his reaction.
I'm shocked, I'm horrified, and I'm extremely saddened that this these sorts of situations are occurring. These were precisely the sorts of things I was trying to prevent with the Psychoactive Substances Act, which would have introduced a regulated market. The fact that we weren't able to proceed with that in quite that form, I warned at the time, would drive these products underground and make them far more difficult to manage and cause tragedies. And it's really very sad to see this happen when it was foreseeable.
So how could it have been prevented under the Act that you were trying to bring in?
Under the Act, any products that were being sold would have had to have been tested first to have been proven to be of low risk. They would have been sold in a highly regulated environment. under highly regulated circumstances. The black market, which is clearly the origin of the products that have caused these deaths, where anything goes, where you don't know what the combinations of substances are, would not have been permitted. That would have been closed down. Unfortunately, when the Act was stalled because of the requirements over animal testing, all that's done, tragically, has been to drive, as I said it would, these substances back underground where we've got no control, no visibility of them, and unfortunately we now see some consequences.
What do you know about this black market? What do you know about these chemicals that are being used that are so dangerous?
Well, that's the point. We know very little because we don't have access to the information, because we don't know what they are. What we are working on with other countries at the moment is an international early warning system, so we can get evidence as to what's coming across borders. That's probably a year or so away from being fully implemented. In the meantime, we rely hugely on the enforcement work of the police, who are doing sterling work in this area. But the tragedy is, because we've driven it underground, we have very little knowledge pre the event of what the substances are, and afterwards it's a question of trying to work out what it was people are using. These things aren't being reported to the National Poison Centre or the Centre for Adverse Reaction to Medicines because they are illegal and underground. So it's very difficult to get a handle on them, and the sadness of it all is the sort of situation we now see being reported.
Are they all coming from offshore?
Well, we assume so. That's more than likely the case, coming in a variety of forms, but because we don't actually know what they are, because we haven't got a regulated market, it's very difficult to tell, absolutely.
And at this stage, as you say, there's no early warning system, so there's no one at the borders stopping it?
There's a lot of intelligence being shared, but internationally there's been work done, and we're part of that, to establish a proper early warning system, because what we do know is that there are literally hundreds of combinations of substances internationally stockpiled. What we don't know is when they're going to start coming down the pipeline and what the impacts will be at the time that they do. That's why, as I said, we moved to try and establish a regulated market to give us control of this. The fact that that didn't happen now means we're very much at the mercy of the illegal traders, and this is what we see the consequence of.
So those drugs are being stockpiled overseas, or have they been stockpiled here in New Zealand as well?
No, there will be some stockpiling at a very low level in New Zealand, but the vast majority of it's overseas. You've got to go back to the origins of all of these psychoactive substances. People think that they've suddenly come on the market in the last few years and that somehow we let them come on the market. The reality is actually quite different. They go back probably the best part of 50 years, and many of them are combinations of substances that were put together in laboratories as scientists tried to work out the cure for cancer or the cure for this ailment or that. But they found that those formulations didn't work. Suddenly what happened was, years later, they found that actually these formulations have a psychoactive effect, so why not put them out on the market in that vein? And there's a massive stockpile of them internationally. Now, this is the problem that the early warning system that's being set up internationally is trying to grapple with, is to get intelligence as to what the combinations are, when they're becoming available, and to where they're being directed. And we're very much at the end of that chain. We're a part of it. We're cooperating as best we can. But because we gave up the opportunity to establish a properly regulated market, as I would have done under the Psychoactive Substances Act, we now find ourselves dealing, just as we always have, with the black market.
And that's the Associate Health Minister, Peter Dunn. Earlier in the show tonight, we spoke with lawyer May Chen, who was last night announced as one of the 16 finalists in the EY Entrepreneur of the Year Awards. Ms Chen told us she was surprised to find herself the only female on stage, alongside 15 other finalists, who included Peter Cross from Dairyworks, Carrie Smith from Ray White, and Hamish Pinkham from Rhythm and Vines. Susan Doughty is the Executive Director of EY. I asked her why there was only one woman among the 16 finalists.
It's a challenge for us. Every year we really set out to make sure that we've got a good balance of women coming into the competition. Last year, in fact, we had 6 females, we had more than 6 females in the competition, but 6 of those were actually finalists and 3 were category winners, so it can be a little bit cyclical. But let me tell you about the program that might help give you some context. So first of all, it's really important to note that these entrepreneurs have to enter themselves or peers will nominate them. But at the outset of the program each year, EY really strive to encourage more women to enter into the award program because we're very focused on diversity.
And how do you do that, Susan? How do you encourage them?
Yeah, so we develop a long list of women that we may have had contacts with as clients or that we have observed in the media who are doing some really great things or have been successful in their businesses. And in fact, what we'll do is personally contact them. And we contact them, we'll go out and see them, we'll go and talk to them about the program, and we really encourage them to enter it. The other thing that we do is we try to make the competition entry itself quite gender neutral, so people, so it doesn't, so it will attract more female entrepreneurs. But at the end of the day, we just don't have any control over who enters and who ultimately wins.
So what's usually the balance between the men and women entering this competition?
Yeah, so again, as I say, with a long list, we try to start out quite gender balanced. By the time we've got those entries into the program itself, up to that point, we're probably looking at about a third of women in that competition list.
Right, but you've ended up with 1 in 16. So what does that mean? Does that mean that the women just don't make the grade? They just don't cut it?
Well, it's interesting because, there's so many good businesses out there and everyone is judged on their merits. Now, one thing I would say is that EY doesn't actually do the judging. We have an external judging panel made up of experts. And again, that's gender neutral as well. We have 4 judges and 2 of which are female. So one of those is Anne Norman and the other is Carmel Fisher. And I think previously we've had Diane Foreman there. So it's not as if we're taking males judging males. We have a very gender-balanced judging panel who are looking and assessing all of these businesses. At the end of the day, we have very strict global criteria for the competition, and at the end of the day, I guess it's about making sure that the most worthy, is that the right word, or everybody is judged on their merits on an equal basis.
Does this frustrate you? Does this, as a woman?
It does. Yeah, it does. And let me tell you something. I've been really involved with the EOY program over the last 3 years. And I have made it my mission to talk to a lot of women and get them involved. But do you know what stands out to me is that they're very humble about their achievements. And I'd say almost universally they don't see themselves at the level of competition, so they don't put themselves forward. And this is really in contrast to a lot of the male entrepreneurs who just jump in, boots and all. So in some ways we see the effects of that imposter syndrome playing out at this level. If I could give you an example, Rajna Patel, who was one of the category winners last year of Nirvana Health, she has an unbelievable story and she did incredibly well last year, but it took about 3 or 4 years, in fact, to get her to enter. So we have this situation where we try to do the legwork, we try to encourage women, but we just need to get them to commit.
With this year's competition, how many women actually entered?
There was about, again, it was slightly less than a third this year. I believe there was about 12 women in the entries.
12. It's not very representative of what's going on in New Zealand, is it?
That's right. And again, we're reaching out through networks. We're putting it out through, Global Women. We're putting it out through all sorts of, company of women. You think about every women's network that might be business connected, and we're trying those channels. So it's really tough.
And that's Susan Doughty, the Executive Director of EY. Community groups warn a freeze on new liquor licences in Auckland will be undermined by bars being allowed to stay open into the early hours of the morning. The Alcohol Regulatory and Licensing Authority has upheld Auckland Council's policy to freeze new liquor licences in parts of the city. but allow some bars and restaurants to stay open later. The authority has been considering appeals against the council's policies aimed at reducing alcohol-related problems in vulnerable communities. Eva Collette reports.
Auckland's Deputy Mayor Bill Cashmore says the local alcohol policy had to strike a balance for the city.
We need a vibrant hospitality industry in the city, but it needs to be safe and secure. And we are really keen and determined to encourage that sort of behavioural change around alcohol consumption in the city, but work with the associations and the outlets to achieve that.
The authority has upheld the council's 2-year freeze on new licences in the city centre and 23 priority areas, predominantly in South and West Auckland. Mr Cashmore says not a single application for a liquor store has been denied in the past year by the District Licensing Committee, an independent body of the council. He says the 2-year freeze, followed by tighter restrictions after that, will be a significant step in reducing risky alcohol-related behaviour.
The onus will be on the applicant to prove that there is an actual need for their new off licence or even their on licence to exist. So rather than council looking through the work, it'll be up to them to say, OK, what is the environment? What are the other contingencies within the environment? How close is a school? How close are other liquor outlets? And then the decision will be, the information is put before the District Licensing Commissioners and they make the decision.
The Mangere o Tahahu Local Board began spearheading a campaign against new liquor stores opening around 4 years ago. Its chair, Lamonga Lydia Soseni, welcomes the ban because she says the community has had a guts full.
Some of these operators are real cowboys. It is just wrong to have the number of alcohol licences throughout Mangere o Tahahu, on licences, off licences, and it's just a pure point of saturation, and that has to be pulled back.
Ms Sorseni says the decision should have come sooner. The Executive Director for Alcohol Health Watch, Nikki Jackson, salutes the new changes, but says the rules don't go far enough. The authority has upheld the council plan to make trading hours for restaurants and bars in the city 8 a.m. to 4 a.m. and extend some outer city areas' hours from 8 a.m. to 3 a.m. Dr Jackson says the late opening hours will undermine the council's goals.
The evidence is really, really strong on this. Around the world it's consistent that every hour after midnight increases alcohol-related violence exponentially, and that in places around the world that have reduced their on-licence hours, they've curbed back violence significantly.
The Takapuna Central Residents Association is devastated tighter opening hours haven't been implemented. A spokesperson, Jill Schroeder, says the association wanted the maximum closing time to remain at 1 a.m. She says a Takapuna bar that has a special 3 a.m. licence once a month is causing problems.
Young people getting totally out of control with street fights, preloading, pushing down signs, damaging property, leftover bottles, smashed glass, which greatly concerned us. And we could only see that with more bars being able to be open to 3 o'clock, there was going to be more potential for harm within our community.
Ms Schroeder says community voices have been stymied throughout the consultation process because it is filled with obstacles. The council says not all licensing applicants will be granted maximum hours and each will be considered on a case-by-case basis. It says the new policies will take some time before they're enforced. A tāmaki makoro mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Eva Collette tēnei.
An employment lawyer has accused companies of using loopholes in the law to avoid paying settlements to angry ex-employees. The comments come nearly a year after an insurance company was ordered to pay an employee more than $40,000. Yet the man has yet to see a cent of the money. Emile Donovan reports.
In May last year, Mustafa Bamji's ex-employer, Global Cover Insurance, stopped paying his salary because of cash flow problems. Mr Bamji was asked to take out a loan on the company's behalf so it could continue trading, and when he refused, he got the sack. He took the case to the Employment Relations Authority, which ruled in Mr Bamji's favour and ordered the company to pay him $40,000 in lost wages. The Employment Court upheld the ruling when Global Cover Insurance appealed. But Mustafa Bamji says he hasn't seen a cent because the company and its directors have disappeared.
There's a lot of bad behaviour demonstrated by these directors. I mean, in my
and these are my words, making a mockery of our justice system.
According to the company's register, Global Cover Insurance is in the process of being struck off. That means all its liabilities, including the money it owes to Mr. Bumgee, have been wiped out. And he is not the only one in this position. In 2014, the authority ruled Thames woman Carol Baker had been constructively dismissed after she was assaulted by her former employer, Peter Maynard, the director of HRT. She was awarded $20,000, but before the ruling was made, the company was sold. She says she spent the past 3 years chasing that money.
The people who run the company, the people who benefit from the company, tend to wriggle out of their obligation by either liquidating, changing their names. Yeah, it just seems so wrong.
An employment consultant, David Collins, says many cash-poor companies will shut themselves down if an ERA decision goes against them.
Most of the ones that I've had have gone into voluntary liquidation. One case owing $40,000, and it was done like a week before our hearing. And the Employment Relations Authority wouldn't hear our case because the company had gone into voluntary liquidation, something that would happen reasonably often because there's that loophole.
A Wellington employment lawyer, Peter Cullen, says there isn't much one can do in that situation.
If you get judgment against the company and the company goes bust, then you've got real problems. Sometimes you can attack the directors, although that's going to be difficult and expensive if there's no obvious way of holding them to blame. But if they've disappeared as well, then the future's gloomy, I think. I can't see that there's much hope for someone in that situation.
Carol Baker says she feels let down by the judicial system.
You know, in this period of time, I've been appeared with 4 court cases and 7 hearings in total. I can't let it go, and it's not the money anymore. It's honestly the principle and the fact that this needs to be changed.
And Mustafa Bumgee says he's disappointed companies can take advantage of their staff.
That was Emile Donovan. And that's Checkpoint for this evening. Have a great weekend.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Timaru District Council is warning people in low-lying areas they may need to evacuate their homes as heavy rain causes flooding across much of the lower South Island. 2 sections of State Highway 1 between Timaru and Oamaru are now closed, from Pariora to the Waimate turnoff and from Morven to Pukeuri over the Waitaki Bridge. The authorities are warning people against any unnecessary travel tonight. People have already been evacuated further south in Oamaru, with many streets flooded, and Emergency Management Otago says they're most concerned about Dunedin City and the Waitaki district. Dunedin Civil Defence says the heart of the rainstorm has stalled